And now we have a special guest today, who's the Minister for Environment. He's here to give us an update on what the government is doing to protect the environment in the face of all that's happening. We are joined by Dr. Muhammad Mahmoud Abubakar, the Minister of Environment. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And how has it been with you within this pandemic?
Well, it has been busy, challenging, forcing us to develop a new normal and become more innovative to contend with the pandemic, which has not really left anything out to chance. It has involved everything, everywhere.
But let me start out with this one. Within this period of the lockdown, a lot of things, a lot of negative impacts on the environment has been reduced. So it would appear that while the humans are locked up and the pandemic is raging, the environment is reviving itself. So would you be one of those, as some in some quarters are doing, would be one of those who suggest that let's bring back the lockdown so that the environment can find its feet again and then we can all come out?
Well, no, I won't, because what we call adaptation and resilience is, first of all, learning to deal with a situation. The resilience is to also make progress and advance in the face of adversity. The two must go hand in hand. What we want to do eventually and as quickly as possible is to be able to develop that vaccine that is needed so that we can return to our economic activities. But with the understanding that the planet during this pandemic lockdown has gotten a reprieve and has shown an effect and improvement in the global, in the climate change impact. So maybe with that, we can now try to do the two without hindering the other. That is the sustainable development that we have always been talking about.
But let's move on and look at this matter of the Kyoto Convention, the Kyoto Protocol, which
Yes.
Nigeria signed the Doha Amendment and becoming the 144th country to do that. What does this mean for Nigeria?
Well, first of all, let me once again congratulate Nigeria and Nigerians, and particularly Mr. President, for signing it. Nigeria made history. Without the president's signature as the 144th, all the 143 would have gone down the drain, and the agreement wouldn't have could not come into force. So this means a lot for Nigeria and for the world. One, starting with Nigeria, this has put Nigeria on the map. Nigeria has been part of the international community in climate conferences and actions since 1994, when it became a party to the UNFCCC, that is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and has been part of the original 192 countries in 1997 that signed up to the Kyoto Protocol, all the way coming to the Doha amendment to the Kyoto Protocol. We will be able to reduce our own emission. We'll be able to interact with the international community, international organization. We'll be able to focus on areas that will help reduce climate change. That is moving to smart agriculture, renewable energy like solar, which the government is energizing education. 9 federal universities right now are being energized with completely solar energy, smart agriculture, waste recycling, capacity building. So we stand to gain a lot in this area. And at the same time, cleaning our own environment, immediate environment, first of all, and then the world in general.
But then there are those who are criticizing that pact as encouraging those who are polluting the waters and the environment to continue in their bad behavior. Do you agree with this?
No, no. You see, in fact, you can trace this to why even this protocol has not been ratified, the Doha Amendment, up till this time. First of all, there is, of course, economic consideration. The world over, every single country is looking out for its own economic viability. The developed countries that were initially actually the culprit to this serious global warming that we are facing and climate change, oftentimes do not want to take the full responsibility of their own actions. They are the one that polluted most of the environment. And then the developing countries are the ones facing the brunt. So what these protocols are doing is to find institutional frameworks that will now lay the responsibility on the nations that pollute the most in terms of investing in the actual climate action remediation and all that. And that's why it took this long. Now, the developing countries, from the beginning, the protocol says the developed countries will reduce emission by 5.2%. This was the original protocol commitment. Then the Doha Amendment is the one that says now, okay, let's make it that collectively every country should now reduce by 18%. Okay, nobody is against that. But look at the commitment that is being put at the time on the developing countries. You must have mechanisms, institutional mechanisms, implementation mechanisms in place that will look at this equitably. If the major polluters are doing 18, the developing are doing 18, how do you support the developing countries? How do you put in place a mechanism that will see to the implementation, that will build the capacity of developing countries, that will help with funding and all this of developing countries? So it took this long because of that. Now, I don't think that this is giving the polluters additional impetus to continue to pollute or have their cake and eat it, as it might be said. The thing is, we are talking about completely collective effort. And the developing countries in this are also there. That is why oftentimes when we go to conventions, we have negotiations. And what this does is, wherever we see some kind of inequality or inequity is going to come into play, the parties will now have to sit, take whatever time is going to take to iron out this, so that we are doing this equitably. And I think with the ratification of the Doha Amendment, which Nigeria became the 144th signatory, will put this in place, because with this now there is a lot more implementation strategy. There is more commitment. The institutional framework is there. Who needs to do what? And part of what Nigeria also does, Nigeria can single-handedly meet the commitment of 18%, even 20% we have pledged, coming down to the Paris Agreement. But going beyond that, many other developing countries, Nigeria inclusive, will require some kind of assistance from developed countries in order to meet that commitment.
Now, the president did say that most of our fauna and flora was now endangered. Yes. And to deal with that problem, a national biodiversity strategy was developed. Talk to us about that, please.
National biodiversity strategy, yes, that was developed by the Federal Ministry of Environment. For one thing, let me start with what is currently on the ground, the pandemic. One of the reasons why we are facing this catastrophe of pandemic is because of this issue of biodiversity. A mixture of, integration between humans and animals, encroaching into the wilderness, depleting or causing the loss of biodiversity. The virus currently we are dealing with has been found to be zoonotic, meaning it can transverse from humans to animals, or animals to humans, rather animals to humans. And this is one of the issues with biodiversity. Nigeria, being a signatory to various biodiversity agreement or protocols or project, is also committed to that. That is why the president mentioned that. And with that, we have developed a document which was developed through interministerial commitment. And what this policy document is doing is to adopt 14 smart national targets with 21 impact indicators and about 67 actions with 123 indicators, performance indicators. This is to keep track of the growth of biodiversity and to slow the loss of biodiversity. In that vein, we have agencies that are also into this. And one of them is the National Park Service. We have the Forestry Department, Federal Forestry Department. We have the Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria. These are all agencies and departments that the government is empowering to make sure that we have stepped off the loss of biodiversity, because it makes great contribution to the climate action fight. So the president has empowered and has instructed, directed all these agencies to come together through an interministerial committee that will develop the best way to tackle the issue of biodiversity loss and to the restoration of also biodiversity across the country and in cooperation with the rest of the world.
Okay, Dr. Abubakar, we'll take a moment and return to look at the Green Wall Initiative and the situation in Ogoni land. Do stay with us, our viewers. Thank you for staying with us. We still have the Minister for Environment, Dr. Mahmoud Abubakar, who's sharing with us the situation around the country. Dr. Abubakar, before we went on that break, you were talking about the plans by government to protect biodiversity, the strategy that has been adopted, even as the president mentioned it. But there's also the bit about, I want to look at how this ties into the Kyoto Protocol and Doha, with the Doha Amendment that has been signed. And yet we still have people, this thing about 11,000 people dying from air pollution. That's a World Bank report. About 11,000 people died from air pollution in Lagos alone. How does all of this tie into protecting our biodiversity and indeed protecting those living in Nigeria?
Of course, biodiversity is basically connected to everything. Air pollution is connected to everything. The environment, of course, the Kyoto Protocol, the amendment, they are all interconnected. The whole environment is interconnected. What happens today in Nigeria can affect Ghana. In fact, catastrophe from way across the world, United States or Russia or anywhere, China, can affect Nigeria. The environment is one and the same, especially in terms of air, of course, in terms of water and everything. Now, the air pollution issue in Lagos and in Nigeria is issue of, one, energy use. Second, the people, the economy, that is the private sector, the government, using the right sources of energy, appropriate technology, all kinds of things that will make a better environment in terms of air quality. Lagos, being a highly cosmopolitan state, you have vehicles, vehicular emission, you have motorcycles, you have zillions of generators, I mean millions and millions of generators, big and small, and so many other things that contribute to air pollution. And this is usually is the normal in cosmopolitan areas, because I have been around the world and I've read how areas, cities become this. Now, what do we do to curb this? First of all, is to look at our energy use. That is why the Federal Ministry of Environment, through the commitment beyond the Kyoto Protocol, in the Paris Agreement also, Nigeria has committed to reducing emission by 20% by this year, 2020, unconditionally, meaning we can do it. And we have instituted programs by the federal government, approved by Mr. President, switching to solar energy, for example, under a program called Energizing Education. We have these universities, about right now, 9 federal universities are being put on totally solar energy off the national grid. Smart agriculture. We are building waste recycling plants across the country and involving the private sector to reduce the amount of waste that is coming in. And that in turn reduces how much energy you will require to extract fresh new resource and produce new product. With recycling, you are using half or less energy required. We are going into so many things to be able to reduce the amount of energy and to reduce in particular the emissions that is going into the atmosphere. The federal government is working.
Honourable Minister, if I may interrupt you here, you've talked about so many things that the government and your ministry is going into to ensure that the environment is protected. But what else is the government going into to restore the lost animal families around the country? For instance, Nigeria is says to have just a population of 300 elephants. There used to be more than that.
Yes. Now, we are talking about population growth. We are talking about the need to feed people, agriculture. We are talking about Nigeria, of course, being within its own boundaries. You are bound to have this kind of close proximity with animals as the population expands, at requirement for food security. So we are bound to go into that. But in addition, what is even worse is poachers, people who kill these animals for either their skin or their tusk or whatever it may be. So this is a multifaceted problem. The government is doing whatever it can, has banned the exportation of so many things, animals, including even forest product. This is all in an effort to reduce the loss of elephants and many other species. And when you push elephant, of course, back into their sanctuary, as the sanctuary shrinks, they have to find somewhere to go. That is why you have this interaction. So the government is very serious about illegal poaching and exportation of this product. The Federal Ministry of Environment doing the same. The government has just approved the employment of additional park rangers that will help in protecting this forest so that we do not have the incident of people coming into contact with the wildlife and killing them in self-defense or some really poaching. So
what about enforcement? What about enforcement, like punishment for those who infringe on this forest or who go ahead to kill this animal? What about enforcement? Because the fines, some of them are just fines that are very minimal.
No, I think the government is more serious now. There is more. We are revising some of this policy. We just recently got a policy approved by the Federal Executive Council, that is the National Forestry Policy in Nigeria. And in that is a policy that has gotten much wider collaboration. Everyone is in it, local government, state, private sector, NGOs, CBOs, and all that. And this has been strengthened. The old one, which has become obsolete, is the one of 2006. And this one just got passed, approved in 2020. So we have upgraded all the mechanisms to stop this poaching, including the punishment for that. In environment, unless otherwise, you want corrective measures. But where you have to punish, you must make sure the punishment is unattractive so that the perpetrators will not just pay for the penalty and continue to pollute or to commit crimes.
Honourable Minister, wet markets have reopened, and we seem to have forgotten that this situation we are in now, this pandemic, is said to have been caused by interaction at some wet market in China. Wet markets, absolutely, which were closed during the pandemic here, have all reopened, and it looks like business is carrying on as usual.
Yes, indeed. It's unfortunate that we have this kind of situation. And some of it, there are certain issues that dealing with them becomes really difficult. You have to find the mechanism. You have to find the way to reach the people. Because some consider certain wet market activities either cultural or even sacred or something. The federal government, again, the National Park Service and other areas, other department of the Forestry Department are taking this to the people campaign, making sure the people understand, and then putting the same laws that you're talking about, the mechanism to checkmate people that will go and do that. These are things that will take a little time to get the understanding. First of all, one of the things is to get the people to buy into program and project that you are putting forward to them. But of course, it has to come with the mechanism to enforce and then to punish. Otherwise, simple education will not do, but you will make a headway when you educate the people and make them understand what is good for them or bad for them or good for the environment and bad for the environment.
You know, when you say educating the people, it some will say, what kind of education are you talking about? Are you going to go back to? Are you thinking about putting in the curriculum from primary school, secondary school, and the university? Is that the kind of education? Are you also talking about reorientation? So we're looking at social education, getting the NGOs to go ahead to educate the people. To what level would you be looking at that? Because that would also tie into the Green Wall initiative, for instance, where everybody, while the government is planning the Green Wall to curb desertification and slow down the spread of desert, everybody's encouraged to plant a tree. How's that working?
Right. Right now, we are dealing with secondary education. In the curriculum, we are infusing environmental education, climate action education. At the primary level, when I was chairman Universal Basic Education Commission, we introduced issues of agriculture. So at every level, we are trying to bring, catching them young to make sure that they understand the concept of good environmental management to step off climate action. So we are doing that at various schools levels. That is one thing. The Great Green Wall Initiative. This is an initiative that is a collaboration between 11 countries across the northern part of Nigeria. And this is a project where every single country has committed to planting trees, to making sure that they improve the livelihood through forestry, agroforestry, land restoration of degraded land, because these are areas where desert encroachment has become a very serious issue. In Nigeria, our Great Green Wall has taken strive in doing a lot of things, and the government is supporting. So far this year, from the beginning of this year to date, in the last conference we had with the African, Biodiversity Initiative, it has been found that Nigeria has reclaimed more degraded land than any other country of the 11 frontline countries in the Great Green Wall Initiative. So we are going full force with that. And just last week, I flagged up a training program for young women and youth in general, men and women, in improving livelihood so that the people in the rural areas are not just depending on the forest product for livelihood. We are teaching them other trade while at the same time engaging them in the planting of trees, in the maintenance, in other words, making them own the project. Okay, this is your plantation, this is your tree. What you do will benefit you. If you don't, you are the one who will suffer more than anybody else. With all the incentive that the Great Green Wall Agency can provide. At the same time, we are providing stoves, smart stoves that can keep people away from going into the woods. But also, in certain areas, we plant special wood lots with trees that are specifically meant as fuel wood. So we are trying to cover every aspect of this initiative so that the project will succeed.
While that's happening up in the northern part of the country, what's happening in the southern part, particularly Ogoni land, for instance, where the cleanup is supposed to have gone to a large extent? How's that going?
The Ogoni cleanup is going. We had some issues from the beginning. It's not quite where we want it to be. However, we have sought for approval from Mr. President, which he graciously approved, to reorganize and restructure, which we have done. Just last week, we went and commissioned 6 sites that have been remediated, completed, and are being certified by our certification agency. We are going on with that. We have awarded additional 36 sites to be cleaned up. And still, to date, the UNEP that drawn up the program, that made the assessment and recommendation, is right there. In fact, we are just engaging them as the project management consultant. Before now, they were just technical advisory committee, but looking at the way the project was going, slow, not at the pace that we want, we did that. There's also livelihood. We're also awarding water project in the 4 local government of the Ogoni land, and this is to improve the livelihood. Currently, training is going for women and youth in livelihood skills like agriculture, aquaculture, poultry, and many other things. So this is going full force right now. We are pushing to get it back on track to where we want to. We have lost about a year or so, that I must admit, but we want to get it back on track, and we are doing that.
Honourable Minister, we'll just go for a very quick break. We'll come back to tidy up this conversation. Please, to stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We still have the Honourable Minister of Environment with us, and we're looking at the situation. Dr. Abubakar, you were talking about the Ogoni cleanup and the progress. You mentioned that UNEP, that had brought about the report initially, is now a consultant to the project. You're also doing livelihood training for the women and youth in the community. You said about 36 new sites have been awarded, so cleanup is started in those ones, and 6 have been commissioned. How is there a way to speed up this entire process, seeing that a year has been lost already?
Yes, one of the ways to speed up, like I said, is the engagement of UNEP, and of course this engagement of some consultants that we found are not adding so much value, or that could just not handle such a big project based on their own level of experience and equipment. These are the reasons why we are doing this. We will continue to go closer to the project, supervising, pushing the contractors, the consultant, but carefully to make sure that when a site is considered completed, remediated, that yes, it is that, which is why we will take samples and test to make sure whatever level of pollution, hydrocarbon pollutants are in there are now out, and the land can go back. One thing I can say is, honestly, in some of the areas that we went to, already there's vegetation growing on that side, which showing that something has been done and is taking place. So this is something that Mr. President specifically said, to adhere to the recommendations by UNEP and to do the project based on global best practice. And that is exactly what we are doing, what we'll intend to continue to do, and put in place whatever mechanism that will deliver the project, even though a year behind, on time for the next additional 1 year, because we have to review. We have to review the time that we'll now submit this project.
Honourable Minister, before the pandemic came along earlier this year, we had already been told that this was going to be an unusual year as regards the rains and flooding. And then the pandemic came along and compounded the lives of farmers across the nation. Some of them lost their total harvest. Is government doing anything to try and mitigate the circumstances?
Yes, government is working with state government. That's the federal government is working with the state government. Particularly, I can tell you one state that has lost so much, Kebbi State. Jigawa is another hectares of rice land, farmland has been flooded and a lot of crops lost. Government is working with the state. In addition, the Federal Ministry of Environment, Ecological Fund, and the rest of them are working on the measures of flood control. Already we have the Department of Erosion Control, Flood Control in the ministry that is working. We have the new map, which is a project under the Federal Ministry of Environment in conjunction with the World Bank. And what we are doing is making sure that we put in place dikes, all kinds of infrastructural provisions that will step off flooding. Water resources also, we are collaborating with them under the Interministerial Committee on Dams that is under the Federal Ministry of Water Resources. This is something that requires all hands on deck to make sure the issue of flooding and erosion. But most importantly also, if you look at urban erosion, which sometimes can go out into the countryside, is also adherence to the provision of urban development, where people do not provide the proper drainages, or where they block the drainages with garbage, or people will build in floodplains or in wetlands, where again flood waters are supposed to be taken in by these special pieces of land that are left behind. And in that, we also call with the state government to make sure enforcement, well, both the federal and state enforcement agencies must make sure that people comply with any urban development rules and regulations. Otherwise, this is an issue that will be recurrent. Then, in addition, if you look at the overall global warming issue, we also have the issues of flooding coming from the larger part, which is what? The warming of the globe, the melting of the polar ice caps in the North Pole, the sea rising, pushing sometimes water into riverine areas or little streams, and then coming up. Where you have no drainages, then you have issue of flooding of also coastal areas. So this is something that requires both local, national, and international effort to make sure the issue of flooding is brought under control.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Mahmoud Abubakar, Minister of Environment. Thank you for sharing today with us.
Thank you for having me.
Sunrise will be back in a moment. Don't go away.